Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, brought to you today by Josh Edison and M. Dentith. Hello and welcome to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy in Auckland, New Zealand. I am Josh Edison. In Guangzhou, China, they are Dr. M.R.X. Dentith. You're heading my way soon, I understand.
I am attending the AAP, the Australasian Association of Philosophy Conference, the New Zealand division, down at the University of Waikato in very early July. So I am sweeping into Auckland basically for one night only, then going to the conference and then returning back to China because my university, like many universities these days, has decided that there's absolutely no way anyone is allowed to have even the smidgen of a holiday when they go overseas for a conference. It's straight in and then straight out.
Efficient.
And also annoying, in part because the last thing you want to do is arrive at a conference basically on the day it starts and then leave the conference the very night it finishes. It's just not good policy. But universities are concerned that, and I believe rightly, academics have used trips overseas in the past for jaunts.
Well, I'm sure you would never do such a thing, but yes.
Oh no, never. I would never. Josh, I have never been jaunty in my entire life.
Is there any advantage to sticking, like are there those sort of conversations that happen after the conference that it would be good to stick around for another day?
Oh yeah, and I mean, as most people will admit, it's the dinner and drinks after the talks where the most productive work is done, in part because certain academics only come up with the good questions after they've got several hours ruminating on the talk you've given. And also, and this is an unfortunate fact, but alcohol does loosen lips. And I've got some of the loosest lips in the business.
It's a well-attested to fact. So we have a new topic today. It's one that came up a few episodes ago when we decided to have a hunt through social medias and see if there were any new conspiracy theories out there. This was one of the few that popped up that we hadn't actually heard of before and seemed like an interesting enough topic to devote an entire episode to.
Indeed. Now, Josh, there is a bit of a problem with this topic, and that topic is we're talking about someone from Scotland, and there is a temptation to want to do a bad Scottish accent.
Yes.
Now, of course, we'll want to avoid that, but the problem is this person might have the most Scottish name possible.
I have been thinking the exact same thing, and I will be...
It's very, very dangerous. So we need to tread very carefully because this is a serious story about a serious situation. And the last thing we want to do is go, "Ok, me haggis."
Yes, no. Let's leave out the haggis, put in a chime, and get on with it. Because today we want to talk to you about the death of Willie McRae, Scottish politician who died in 1985.
On the 7th of April, under mysterious circumstances.
Well, yes, as we will see. So Willie McRae was a very interesting person from the sounds of things. He was born in 1923, served in the Royal Indian Navy during World War II, where he became a lieutenant commander and aide-de-camp to Admiral Lord Mountbatten.
And possibly as a consequence, became a fervent supporter of Indian independence.
Yes, he did. He was a supporter of many causes, I think. But after the war, he became a solicitor and an activist for the Scottish National Party, the SNP. He, at one point, I believe, challenged for leadership of the party, but didn't
I
quite
believe
get
he
it.
actually challenged more than once, I believe, yeah.
But he eventually was the vice chairman of the SNP, so he was high up in it. He also stood for election a couple of times as an SNP candidate, but also didn't get in. But nevertheless, he did have quite an impact in his life. He was a big... he had close ties to the State of Israel, and had done a
Well,
bunch
right.
of
So
legal work
if you
there.
go to his Wikipedia page, they'll say that he fashioned Israel's maritime law and was emeritus professor at the University of Haifa. Now, this gets mentioned in a variety of places, but as everyone seems to note, there's no citation as to where this information comes from. So it may well be true, but Wikipedia does note citation is needed. And you would think that if he was indeed the architect of Israel's maritime law, there would be a lot of supporting evidence for that available, and it does seem hard to come by. But it is a noted thing about him, not just on Wikipedia, but in a variety of articles about his death, that he was the person who fashioned Israel's maritime law.
He definitely, though, did a bunch of campaigning and activism as a member of the SNP. And his big thing that gets mentioned a lot in all the profiles of him is that with his successfully campaigning against the dumping of nuclear waste at the Galloway Hills. I've heard several times he was referred to as he single-handedly stopped this dumping from happening. He appeared to be the key figure in that campaign. Not being a fan of nuclear waste, and I think possibly the nuclear power industry in general.
He once claimed that nuclear waste should be stored where Guy Fawkes put his gunpowder, which I think also indicate he was probably also a Scottish nationalist, not just a member of the Scottish National Party, but someone who probably believed that Scotland and England would be better off apart rather than together.
Now, his death has been discussed and dramatised. I know of at least one book, two plays that coincidentally came out the same year, despite having no knowledge of each other, and I think had the same name as well, which is a phrase to do with the case. There's been at least one BBC documentary, possibly more. I've seen him described as Scotland's Dr. David Kelly, although given that David Kelly died later.
Afterwards. It really should
David
be
Kelly
that he is England's Willie McRae.
Willie McRae, yeah. If you recall, we talked about Dr. David Kelly's death in October of 2022.
Well, I should point out his death was on the 17th of July 2003. Yes. We discussed it in 2022.
Yes. So he, if you recall, he was a UN chief inspector who was involved in the search for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And he died, yes, as you say, 17th of July 2003, apparently by suicide, but there are conspiracy theories that say he was murdered and staged to look like a suicide.
And the reason why people talk about Millie? I mean, the reason why people talk about Millie is actually a side issue to the discussion in this podcast. The reason why people talk about Willie McRae is that also this is a man who apparently died by suicide, and there are conspiracy theories that say that the suicide was staged and actually what happened was a murder.
Yes, so the basic details of his death before we get into the claims and counterclaims and conspiracy theories. What, as far as I'm aware, is not disputed is that on the evening of the 5th of April 1985, he left his flat in Glasgow by car, headed for his cottage at Ardelve by Loch Alsh. He never made it there. Around 10 a.m. the next morning, so the 6th of April, his car was spotted off the road, of whatever motorway he'd been going up, straddling a burn, a little stream next to the road. It was, I believe, a pair of Australian tourists were driving along, and somebody noted, "Hey, is that a car over there?" And so they stopped. They found the car. They found him inside it, alive but unconscious and unresponsive, with blood on his temple. Apparently, his seatbelt's still on. So that pair of tourists then flagged down the next car to come past, and as luck would have it, it was being driven by a doctor, Dr. Dorothy Messer. And more than that, one of the passengers in that car was a man called David Coates, who was an SNP councillor who actually knew Willie McRae. So when he got down to the car, he was like, hang on, I know that guy. So Dr. Messer, her examination on the scene, noticed that one of his pupils was dilated, which generally means brain damage of some kind. Her estimate was that he'd been in that state for about 10 hours, which would be, so midnight, presumably. And she, at the time, noted a strong smell of alcohol. Emergency services were called. He was taken to one hospital and then transferred to another, and there's a bit of a bit of disagreement over like what scans were done when, which hospital, and what have you. But the complicating factor came when a nurse was cleaning the dried blood off of his head and found that underneath the blood was what appeared to be a gunshot wound. And so they took him for an X-ray, and sure enough, showed a bullet lodged inside his head. Once they knew to look for one, investigators found a revolver in the water under where his car had been, or possibly near. That's one of the things that's
we'll get on to the funny business around the crime scene very soon.
But nevertheless, the end result is his brain was severely damaged, his vitals were weak. The following day, the 7th of April, his life support was switched off following consultation with his next of kin. So that's the story. So what's the official version then?
Well, the official finding was that it was death by suicide. He had shot himself in the head after crashing his car. Now, we should also point out that the official theory is the theory that the family and friends accept and really would wish that other people would accept as well. As we've both seen, kind of going through what surviving media reports we have of the time versus the kind of post facto analyses of the death of Willie McRae, which are the kind of the predominant narrative you find online these days. His brother Fergus is mentioned a lot. It's not quite clear whether he's the only surviving member or the only person who's willing to talk to the press about his brother's death. But his brother Fergus keeps on saying, we accept it was suicide. It was a suicide. People need to stop with the conspiracy theories about my brother's death. Now, this is not one of those cases of someone committing suicide and it being a surprise. Willie McRae had suffered from depression. He was an alcoholic and had threatened suicide before, and notably, he had multiple drink driving offences, and if he'd been caught behind the wheel of a car drunk, which he would have been done if he'd been found after a car crash, his license would have been taken away from him, but even worse, he would have been jailed for his behavior. So we have a kind of motivation here. He crashes his car, realizes that basically this is it, it's jail time for me if I'm caught, and suffering from depression decides to kill himself rather than suffer the consequence of his actions. So that is the official theory, and that is the theory that the family takes to be true and really wishes that people like us wouldn't bring up rival hypotheses in a podcast.
Nevertheless, we are a conspiracy theory podcast, and this is interesting to look through the conspiracy theory just to see how it's similar and different, I guess, from similar cases. So there was the official finding, as we'll see later. There was never a fatal accident inquiry, which is what you would expect when someone dies as a result of a car crash. I don't know. I don't know the specifics there, whether it's because, he actually died due to the self-inflicted gunshot wound. So therefore, the fact that he had crashed his car beforehand means we don't need an FAI, but I don't know. The SNP apparently ran their own inquiry, and they faced institutional resistance, and they weren't happy with the official inquiry's results. But people, since his death, people have suggested that, yes, as with Dr. David Kelly, that he was actually murdered and then his death had been staged to look like a suicide. Now, why would people think this in the first place? He was not without enemies. Obviously, he'd made no friends with the nuclear power industry with his campaigning against the nuclear waste dumping. He'd apparently also gone after drug traffickers in his area and as part of his sort of activism. Apparently, his flat in Glasgow had been broken into several times before his death, although I don't know.
Yeah, and this is one of these things where some people take this to be evidence that he had enemies who were actively plotting against him. So maybe the drug traffickers or members of the nuclear power industry were breaking into the flat either to scare him or to get compromat on him. Although it has also been pointed out by some sources that we're talking about Glasgow in the 1980s, and Glasgow was not exactly the best city in Scotland to be living in due to a high crime rate, so his flat being broken into may just have indicated he was a man living in Glasgow.
Yeah. And then there are also claims that he had evidence on someone about something. So there are claims, for instance, there's an article in the Scotsman by Paul Delamore and Stephen Semple, which says stories emerged that McRae had been privy to secret papers relating to Dounreay, which is a nuclear site, and that he was being followed by special branch officers. It was also claimed he had uncovered information about a high-profile pedophile ring dubbed the Untouchables. And I'd seen in other articles, claims that he was investigating reports of sort of pedophile rings involving politicians or judges or other people in power. Another article from the Herald in Scotland included the claim, before leaving, he showed a briefcase of documents to a friend, PC Donald Morrison, and told him, "I've definitely got them this time." That article is the only place I've seen that particular claim. But,
Yes, I haven't seen that being made elsewhere either.
No.
And we don't really know who the them is.
Yes. So that's the thing. There are these claims that he had enemies, possibly he had evidence against these enemies that they would like to remain secret or something like that, but it's always a little bit vague. But then we get then when it comes to the question of actual sort of evidence for a conspiracy, there is again a lot of claim and counterclaim. That Herald in Scotland article also says, the problem with Willie McRae's death is that it wasn't clean. It was a shot to the head, but who pulled the trigger? Official version, he did. Skeptics' version, the state did, or the nuclear industry, or high-profile pedophiles fearing public exposure, or drug smugglers. These days, with conspiracy theories prospering on social media, it's wise to be skeptical of skeptics. But skeptics and conspiracy theorists have much ammunition in this case. 2 bullets fired. No fingerprints on the gun found 60 feet from the body. Deceased previously under surveillance. A supposed suicide phoning ahead to have a fire lit at his holiday cottage. His crashed car pointing the wrong way for his intended journey. And these are the sorts of things that pop up. And as we'll see, it's not 100% clear in all these cases where these claims are coming from and how well they're supported.
Yes, and sometimes the claims are based on evidence, but they're based on evidence after some event has occurred that has changed the nature of what the evidence would have been before the event. So one of the main irregularities that people like to point to. I mean, they could also be pointing around. I mean, people can gesture their heart's content, up, down, sideways, widdershins. But one of the main now I can't even say the word irregularity. One of the main irregularities that people like to focus on is that because it was treated initially as a car accident and not the scene of a suicide, the investigation kind of went skewer from the very beginning. So people point out that there are claims that the car was taken away because it was simply an accident. So once you take the person who's had the accident away, you remove the car from the scene to make it clear for other road traffic, etc., etc. But that once they realized that actually there was more to it than just a car accident, a gun had been shot, the car was apparently returned back to the scene in order to either allow the investigation to take place properly or to put on a show that an investigation was being done according to regulations.
Yes, and that Paul Delamore, the guy who wrote the article in the Scotsman, that seems to be his big thing, the idea that the car had been taken away and then moved back. And I've seen he put online mountains of his research. He did lots of correspondence, conducted his own interviews by email with various people involved, and in particular the Australian tourists who first found Willie McRae's car. He has a long sort of chain of emails with the guy there, who says that he he left a glove or something at the crime scene on the day, and so then he went back the next day to see if he could find his lost glove, and saw that the car was there with a bunch of police officers around. Now that was the next day, the 7th. Whereas the official version is that the car was taken away on the 6th, the day that Willie McRae was found. And so this article, it sort of he thinks there's plenty of evidence to show that the car was taken away on the 6th, but it was definitely there on the 7th. And
which might then account for the car being pointing in the wrong direction if it's been put back in the wrong place, which is then crucial for the claims about the gun, because people claim that the gun was found an unreasonable distance from the car. So if Willie McRae shot himself in the head, died, and then threw the gun away, that seems like a bit of an anomaly. But of course, if the car was put back in the wrong location, a gun which dropped from his hand in one location may look like it's an unreasonable distance away from where the car was reparked after the event.
Yes, so that's an interesting one, because you have the claim that the gun was too far from the car, but then that's sort of answered by the claim that the car had been taken away and put back.
Yeah.
So then there's the business about the revolver. The revolver was found with 2 spent cartridges inside it. It had been fired twice. Now, I don't know. I don't know guns, but I'm not sure if it was shown that both of those shots had been fired at around the same time, or whether it's possible that the gun had been fired a while ago and then for the second time on that day. Even then, people have sort of said, even if they had been fired twice, it's not impossible that he could have fired a test shot in frustration to check that the gun was working because he twitched on the trigger. There are possibilities, but it is the case that he was, as far as the official version goes, shot once, and yet the gun appeared to have been fired twice. And then there's the business of no fingerprints supposedly being found on the gun, which, given that it was supposedly fished out of the burn, I also don't know much about fingerprints. They are oily, but
but I don't know how long they survive in water for. I mean, this is something which I found in one of the articles. Once again, you have to keep saying, we found these things in reports. These reports are, in many cases, 20 years after the event, and there's very little in the way of X said Y with the citation. But it is claimed that 20 yards away from the car, and once again, we don't know whether it's 20 yards away from where the car was originally or 20 yards away from where the car was put back, it is claimed they found a heap of other papers that had been meticulously ripped up and formed into a pyramid, which had his smashed watch and a garage bill on top of.
Yes, I believe that claim was made by David Coates, the MP who was at the crash site.
Yes,
and as far as I'm aware, he's the only person who's made that claim. I think other people have said, I don't recall seeing that at all. So that's an interesting detail to bring up, but and again, it's just very unclear exactly who we should be listening to and what the real facts of the case are there.
And indeed, going back to the gun, one of the attending nurses, and it's not clear which hospital this was at, given he went to 2 hospitals after being rescued from the roadside, one of the attending nurses claimed that the finding that the bullet wound was in his right temple is false because it was located at the back of his neck, which would make the suicide verdict be at least somewhat suspect.
Yes, and again, I mean, presumably that is the sort of thing you could check. If they took x-rays, you'd think there would be medical records, but
Yes, yeah.
I don't know. Certainly, in the case of the gun, I believe Willie McRae's brother Fergus had said, yes, that is a gun that was owned by Willie McRae, although it was unlicensed. So there wasn't a record of him owning it, but it was apparently like a one he'd kept from the war or something like that. And then also, as well as that, apparently some of the statements of the Northern Constabulary from the time of the investigation are apparently missing as well. So we have a whole lot of claims, all complicated by the fact that, as you say, it was initially investigated as a car accident and then only as a shooting a day or so later, once it was found that he had actually been shot. And then the fact that a fatal accident inquiry was never carried out. So the fact that an FAI was never carried out doesn't prove there's a conspiracy, but perhaps if one had been carried out, it might disprove one, which is why I think people are still calling for an inquiry of that kind to this very day.
And indeed, the SNP ran their own inquiry into the death of Willie McRae because they were not satisfied with the official inquiry's results, in part because of the lack of an FAI, and they faced institutional resistance to their own investigation. So there was an attempt at a second investigation, but it didn't go particularly well.
So here's one thing that is a matter of record. In 2015, there was a petition to hold a fatal accident inquiry. That petition failed, and the campaign Justice for Willie was set up by a man called Mark McNichol. Now, he is a Scottish writer and a director. He'd been brought on to work on one of the plays based on Willie McRae's death. Remember, I said there were, just purely by coincidence, in I think 2014 or sometime around then, two different plays came out that were based on the death of Willie McRae, and Mark McNichol was sort of brought on. He didn't write the play. He was brought on about it, not knowing who Willie McRae was at the time. And then the more he heard of the story, the more he thought, "Geez, this is we really need to check this out." So he set up the Justice for Willie campaign. The campaign hired private investigators to do their own investigation. But the conclusion of that investigation did not turn up anything that undermined the official verdict. So Mark McNichol has his own website, and via the Internet Archive...
We should point out, he used to have his own website.
Well, he still has his own website, but it doesn't have anything about the Justice for Willie campaign. It's just about his work as a director and a writer. But yeah, on an old version of his website, there was a statement about the whole campaign, and it sort of goes through how he got into it, how the campaign was run, and so on and so forth. But it includes bits like this. My conclusion, along with the majority of people on our campaign committee, is that there is no evidence that undermines the official Willie McRae suicide verdict. In fact, we believe when considered collectively, our new evidence reinforces it. When I first heard of Willie in 2014, I couldn't believe what I was hearing relating to the circumstances surrounding his death. I've learned a valuable lesson. Like so many others, I was taking what I was being told as facts and then passing them on. Those facts were the result of over 30 years of the Scottish equivalent of Chinese whispers. I don't think we call it that anymore.
No, we do not.
It's the telephone game anyway. But
and actually, the telephone game predates the derogatory term Chinese whispers anyway.
But so I mean, the implication there seems to be that a lot of these claims around conspiracy, and presumably many of the ones we've talked about already, are just sort of things that have been repeated over the years, have been passed on from one person to another without really reference to any actual sort of source or evidence to back them up.
Which is why we have been quite carefully throughout this podcast going, well, look, it has been claimed online that. We're not asserting it to be the case because we are also doubtful that some of these modern retellings of the death of Willie McRae may well be working with bits of misinformation which have just become standard wisdom over time.
So further on that page, it said, At the end of our investigation, we couldn't prove it was suicide. Though taking into consideration all of the witness statements, it was clear to the majority of the campaign committee that it was likely to have been a suicide. Though I suspect even if we had produced video footage of Willie shooting himself along with the suicide note, some people will simply refuse to accept it. That's why I went into detail around the coincidental nature of the investigator selection, which came earlier. We talked about how it chosen investigators and the methods by all that. But continues, because I have already been contacted by people who signed the petition or supported the campaign. They expressed concern that the investigators were Special Branch or MI5 plants. Some even intimated that I may have been got at and was steering the conclusion towards suicide. Those of you who know me will have a chuckle at that suggestion. I believe it is likely that Willie McRae committed suicide, and I feel the time has come for his family, friends, and also the witnesses to be left in peace. The authorities didn't do the public or themselves any favours with their wall of silence. For me, though, the real point here isn't Willie's suicide, it's the way his death was used by people with a specific agenda. Despite the absence of facts and proof, people, myself included, relayed conspiratorial theories, and they became a national myth of tsunamic proportions. For many, their enthusiasm was everything to do with being pro-independence and anti-establishment, and little to do with holding UK security services to account. So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things there. How much of it was simply sort of pro-Scottish nationalist type, wanting to say that this hero of Scottish nationalism or the Scottish National Party had been done in by security forces or nefarious elements, possibly English ones.
And we have to point out that the bungling by the police of the investigation certainly hasn't helped any.
Yes, so the whole car being there and then not being there and what have you, which Mr. Delamere reckons Mr. Delamore reckons that he has ample evidence of actually happening. It's certainly possible that because they thought it was just an accident, and then later found out, oh, hang on, there was actually a shooting involved. We need to do a bit more of an investigation, and the car was put back, maybe for show, maybe because maybe they were able to get something interesting from just sort of recreating the scene or something, or maybe it was just to make it look like they were doing a more thorough investigation after they realised that they needed to do a more thorough investigation. We don't really know. Certainly, again, as far as I'm aware, the official version is that didn't happen, that the car was taken away and never brought back at a later time. And it's sort of all, even if there is a conspiracy here, it's a possible, as we've seen a million times before, around the wall of silent wall of science, I don't think they employed one of those, the wall of silence, though, could be some form of conspiracy, but merely to cover up an inadequate investigation, not necessarily.
Well, yes, I mean, I think that's actually the most plausible conspiracy to think of here. The investigation was bungled at some particular stage, and as we saw with the SNP trying to reinvestigate the investigation, the police often don't like people criticizing their work and will go out of their way to stonewall you and go, no, we did things properly the first time. Ignore the report over there that indicates that we did not. And so that seems like a plausible case of a conspiracy to cover up incompetence. But the problem is, once you engage in a conspiracy to cover up incompetence, people are quite naturally going to go, well, maybe you're not covering up incompetence. Maybe you're covering up malfeasance instead.
Yes, it is interesting where they say it's sort of conspiracy versus cock-up, but then you can also be conspiracy to cover up a cock-up. So the two aren't mutually exclusive. So, that is the unfortunate death of Willie McRae. Again, interesting. I see why people would want to compare it to the death of David Kelly. There are definitely parallels there. But I mean, the people closest to him are happy to accept the official verdict, and I certainly don't see anything that any reason not to. Yes, there do appear to be irregularities, but I certainly haven't seen anything that suggests that those irregularities point to a murder any more than they point to a bit of a cock up during the investigation, which people would rather have swept under the rug.
Yes, I mean, I guess you do need to at least consider, is it a possibility that Willie McRae was taken out by the forces that he was arraigning himself against? Because he was arraigning himself against fairly powerful forces at the time, the nuclear power industry and drug traffickers. And so when a prominent politician dies, it is reasonable, if they die under suspicious circumstances, to ask, well, what actually caused this particular death? But because we have a rival hypothesis here, which fits in with what was known of the character of the man at the time, a man suffering from depressive episodes, a man who was an alcoholic, someone who had been disbarred from his legal practice 4 years prior, and someone who knew that if he was caught drunk behind the wheel of a car, he'd be facing jail time, not simply a slap on the wrist. That is also the kind of thing that goes, well, in those kind of situations, he may well have elected to commit suicide rather than find out what happens next. And given
Yes,
he had
certainly.
made suicide attempts in the past, this is not an unsurprising thing that he did.
Yes, and certainly if alcohol were involved also, we can imagine him not fully being in his right mind anyway. So
Which
yeah, I
also
mean,
might
there's
explain 2 bullets being fired as well.
yeah. So I mean, yes, it certainly does seem like a case where it's a good story to imagine nefarious conspiracy at work, but the official version really just does actually seem to be perfectly plausible. Little inconsistencies and irregularities notwithstanding.
Well, yes, and this is one of those situations where the errant data, which seems to be unexplained by the official theory here, may well be errant data which is due to police incompetence. It might be errant data due to people inflating their stories over time, because most of these tales about the bullet wound being in the back of the neck rather than in the temple are things which emerged 20 years after the fact, as opposed to were reported at the time. Some of that errant data that suggests a malign conspiracy, as opposed to, say, a conspiracy to cover up a cock up, may well just be inventions or elaborations which have taken on a life of their own.
So there you have it. That is the end of an episode, but not the end of everything, because of course there will be a
Although
bonus
imagine,
episode.
Josh, if it were. And that is the
Even if
end.
it
In fact,
were.
we're not even putting this episode out because actually we've just discovered the universe has ended.
Fortunately, that is not the case, as far as we know. We do intend to record a bonus episode for our beloved patrons, where we'll have an update on that wacky business with Lego and police brutality, and see what else has been going on in the world.
Indeed,
Keep
we
on going
will.
on, you might say.
And if you
And I
want to get
suppose,
in on
oh,
that
yes.
goodness, go to patreon.com and look up the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy for $1 a month, which is, basically a currency unit in your country of choice. You can get access to all of that Patreon goodness.
So there you have it. And I suppose I've said this before, but I think it was a filler episode, possibly not in the main one. But today I attended what now I believe is the fourth funeral I've been to of a person younger than me. I'm not a fan, and this is the third where the unfortunate cause of death was bowel cancer. So I've said this before: if you're in your 40s, get a colonoscopy if you can, if it's within your means, if you have what health insurance or access to health system that you need. Just go and get one. I've had one. It's fine. It's an inconvenience, but it's fine. And it really does seem to be a very good thing if you can catch this sort of stuff early. So farewell, Isaac. bloody good English teacher from all reports. So with that, slightly less cheery, but I mean, it hasn't been a cheery episode, has it? We've been talking about
No, I mean, yeah, we've been discussing either a murder or a suicide, and we did rather conspicuously not use a bad Scottish accent at any point.
No, perhaps we'll save those for the bonus episode. But for the rest of you, we'll talk to you next time, which actually now your travels...
Well, yes, I mean, this is the kind of conversation we should probably have outside of the podcast. But yes, recording times are going to be a little bit wacky because even though I'll be in the same country as you, unless you want to drive all the way to the Waikato to record a podcast episode, we won't be doing an in-person recording when I'm back.
No. And indeed, this episode is a little bit late coming out also because when we were supposed to be recording, there was no power at my house and it was supposed to come back on at 7 o'clock, which would be before the time we recorded. It did not come on at 7 o'clock. It came on at 9
what time did it come back on?
9 p.m. in the end. Good fun. So, barring any sort of technological wackiness, we will talk to you later at some point in the future, that's for sure. Goodbye.
Yes. Goodbye.
The Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy features Josh Addison and Associate Professor M.R.X. Dentith. Our producers are a mysterious cabal of conspirators known as Tom, Philip, and another who is so mysterious that they remain anonymous. You can contact us electronically via podcastconspiracy@gmail.com or join our Patreon and get access to our Discord server. Or don't, I'm not your mum. And remember, he who laughs last is standing behind you right now.